All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome in to the Connection Loop podcast. I'm Rob. This episode is really exciting because we have with us Ron Green. And Ron is an absolute expert in the AI field. He's been in the space a long time, technology. And he's also the co-founder and chief technology officer at kungfu.ai. They do management, consulting, engineering. They're a firm that really empowers a lot of businesses to really leverage the full potential of AI. So, Ron, welcome in.
Thanks for having me, Rob.
Yeah, this is awesome. Look, this is a conversation that, as we mentioned before we went on here, a long time coming in terms of your background, how long you've been studying AI. It's like you were kind of reading the future and prepared well before any of us were prepared for AI. So, if you don't mind, just update the audience a little bit about you and kind of that aspect and kind of how you got to Kung.ai.
Yeah, absolutely. So did an undergrad in computer science, and truth be told, by the end of that degree, I was kind of burned out. I mean, I remember thinking my last semester, I don't know what I'm going to do when I graduate, but it is not going to involve computers because I was just done. And my last semester, I had an elective, and I took AI 101. And this was over 30 years ago, and I was just blown away. And I really truly knew within maybe 6 weeks of that course, this is what I want to do with the rest of my life. And so I went to grad school, got a master's in artificial intelligence, and was ready to hit the world. And was really concerned that I was late to the game. That, I think that's just amazing. I remember thinking like, oh, they've got this all sussed out,
Late to the game, Ron. That's just funny. Late to the game back then. Late to the game. That's
I
interesting.
promise you, I thought that because we had textbooks on AI and everything. And I thought, well, they've got this all figured out. Then, the dot-com bubble came. And by the end of that, I would say, 2005, like we talked about, nobody cared about artificial intelligence. There was no money. There was no research. There were just a few diehard people keeping the dream alive until really about 2012 when it kind of resuscitated. And now we've kind of been off to the races for the last decade.
What was the big jump from 2012? Like what kind of happened? Was it within the science, or was it in just the talent level of people doing this, or what was it, a combination of both?
There was this breakthrough. What happened was there were some people, and one of them is a guy named Jeff Hinton. He is sort of considered one of the godfathers of artificial intelligence. In fact, he literally just won the Nobel Prize about 3 or 4 months ago for his contributions. And he was at the University of Toronto, and he and some of his grad students just had this deep believing that artificial neural networks, were what the foundations of AI should be built upon. And they did not care that the rest of the world didn't believe them. In fact, it was, I have one of my co-founders at Kung Fu AI was doing a PhD at the time at UCLA. And he said that he was taught like, oh, do not waste your time on artificial neural networks. That is a career ender. It's a dead end. And some of his grad students, one of whom, Ilyas Huskover, who was one of the co-founders of OpenAI, they built a model called AlexNet, and it shook the world because it was a computer vision model that could classify images, like you could show it an image of a horse or a cloud or a car, and it could tell you what the image was of. And this is in 2012, and it did it pretty significantly better than anything had ever done that before. And within, I want to say, 3 years of that, computer vision models were able to classify thousands of objects at a superhuman level. And from that point on, everybody realized we were on the right path.
Wow. Well, that's unbelievable. And I feel like, just with us, here at Dub, we talk about this all the time, how it just feels like in the last year or two, and let me know if this is accurate, it feels like from just commonplace here that AI is just moving and growing so quickly. Is it making these leaps within the last couple of years more than what people thought, or is it on path to what you thought it would be time-wise?
Oh, okay. That's a good question. It is definitely jumping leaps and bounds. One funny anecdote, I read this post by a math professor a couple of days ago. He said he was using like ChatGPT this summer, and it couldn't even do math at a fifth grader level. And then by August, when they released the O1 model, he said it was doing it pretty much at like a senior in high school level, and he was impressed. And he tried the new reasoning model O3 over Christmas, and it was
Mhm.
better at math than he was. And he's a
Ooh.
professor. So things are
Oh.
moving at a breakneck pace. It is very much the case that things that I thought might not happen till 2030,
Mhm.
2035, we're
Mhm.
already passing those thresholds, and
Mhm.
there's really no sign that things are slowing down.
So there's no wall that you can think of that from studying that maybe like, oh, it might hit this eventually, or is there no wall to think of?
That's a great question. That's one, so you really honestly you put your finger on one of the biggest open questions. So right now within AI, most of the gains are being had just by scaling. Bigger
Mhm.
models, meaning models with more parameters, essentially the ability to have uh, a larger memory context is a way to think
Mhm.
about it, and
Mhm.
training it on bigger data. And there are sort of the curves that we can use to predict how these models will perform at certain scales.
Yep.
But where some people think we might be getting close to those curves tapering off because they're exponential, but
Mhm.
we know they won't be exponential forever. They're gonna soften. And one of the big open questions is, will we continue to see big gains just
Mhm.
through scaling, or
Mhm.
will we have to go back to the drawing board and think more deeply about different architectures and different designs?
Mhm.
My bet is I think we're going to get quite a bit more
Mhm.
over the next 2 to 5 years just using the approaches that we know about and understand.
Mhm.
And then we'll probably hit a wall. My guess is we'll probably hit a wall on around 2030
Mhm.
unless we see some additional breakthroughs.
Okay. That's where you ask the AI, how do we get around the wall? And then the
That's right.
AI tells
Well,
you.
what's so funny about that is, that's literally what will happen once we get to this point where we have this, artificial
Excuse me.
superintelligence.
Yeah.
We literally will be able to leverage it to help us figure out how to make it better, and that's what makes AI unique from every other technology or tool in the history of humanity.
Yeah, it's like you're teaming together almost, like you're thinking, "What's that strategy? What should it be? Oh, wait, what am I thinking?" And just ask the AI.
That's
You know, it
exactly
it
right.
yeah, so from a layperson like myself and other people that aren't, at the level of expertise that you are, it's almost like you're seeing it before it happens like you did 30 years ago. So it's interesting to get your perspective about down there. Um, what about as far as see on the podcast here, we're all about helping business leaders, sales leaders, right? And you mentioned scaling, right? We'll keep going with just scaling. So obviously with sales, we try to scale. We want repeatable and scalable. We want that in terms of that. And AI has filtered its way into sales with us. We have an AI sales assistant. We have an AI writer. We have an AI, a lot of things within our AI suite. But from you, really leaning into this sales and business aspect of it. What's AI 101, as you like to call it, for businesses?
So most businesses really woke up in, I think, early 2023 because ChatGPT was released on the last day of November 22, and began to kind of play around with it, get comfortable with it. And by the end of the 2023, um, almost all businesses had a sense that there was something there, but they were mostly focused on generative AI,
Mhm.
working with language models, asking it questions, having it summarize information, having it um, manipulate data and transform it and things like that. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of businesses for about a year and a half fell into
Mhm.
this trap of thinking that all AI is generative AI.
Mhm.
And there's really a broad spectrum of capabilities out there. And if you're a business listening to this and you're wondering how to get started, the good news is there are tons of things that you can do that
Mhm.
are relatively small first steps, and you don't have to take giant moonshots
Mhm.
to come up to speed. And what we at Kung Fu AI really advocate is to consider generative AI. Absolutely, it's on the table. It can do some amazing things, but don't walk away from what we call sort of domain specific AI. We've built systems for companies that can do amazing things, can do like automated trading at a
Mhm.
superhuman level, but it's very narrow. This is not a general purpose AI. It can do one thing and that's it. but it can do it at a superhuman level. And I think businesses would be best served at this point in time by looking for opportunities where they can leverage their proprietary data,
Mhm.
and take advantage of that as a differentiator using domain specific AI that gives them some type of competitive advantage. And so that could be like, sales modeling or price optimization or fraud detection or any number of these different things that are very business specific and narrow from a functional perspective. And the last thing about this, and I think this is really important, is generative AI, as powerful as it is right now, we're still struggling with it from a technology perspective because it does things like hallucinate. So it can make up fake information. It can
Right.
make up fake references. It can kind of go off the rails a little bit. I think we're going to solve that problem, but it makes it really challenging to productionalize because you don't know if you can just trust the outputs and just put them right out in the world to your customers.
Is there a level of concern with what's it called, the pollution, where if you're giving the AI too much information? I kind of talk a little bit about that from a business sales perspective. Like I want to almost give my whole prospectus on what I want to sell to a client, but maybe that's not the best idea. Or is that what's kind of the answer in there?
Yeah, that's a great question. That used to really be more of a concern where you would say, look, they call it the context window, which is how much information you can feed into a model as context for its output or its prediction. That is growing so quickly right now. It's less and less an issue. And I'll maybe give you one more example, which is there's something called RAG, retrieval augmented generation, and companies can essentially use this technique with generative language models, and you can give it access to all of your data. It could be millions and millions of documents that are just raw documents, unstructured, and you allow the model to have access to it all. And so then you could do things. Imagine you're a law firm and you want to ask questions about, do we have any contracts? You're a legal team. Do we have any contracts that have a clause like this that we can reference? Or do we have any contracts with customers that have questionable terms? Or you could use it to answer help desk questions. And so really dealing with too much data is one of the things that modern AI does not have a problem with. And it's one of the reasons it's so powerful now.
That's interesting. I wonder, will it be to the point where AI gets to the point where it gets information, but immediately can disseminate what's important and what's not? Like, in other words, you provide all this information about something from a sales perspective that you might want to have the client, which should know, but the AI might know on its side. It's like, you know what? That's not necessary. That's not necessary. That's not necessary. Is that kind of separation of important and not important already happening, or is that something that will happen even more?
It is definitely already happening, and it can kind of happen in a couple different levels. One is if you build a sort of a narrow AI. Let's stick with like the trading example. That can be really, really good in a way that is kind of black boxy, meaning it may make recommendations, but you may not know why. You may not even understand. And technically, we do have quite a bit of a challenge understanding how these models work. There's no magic, there's no randomness, it's just software, but they're so complex that it is difficult sometimes to reverse engineer exactly why decisions were made. But with language models and other type of generative AI, it is very much the case that they are very good at understanding and separating important details from incidental details. And that's one of the advantages of going with those sort of large language model approaches.
It's just all so beyond interesting. It's, again, like I said before we got on here, it's like you're in the middle of like the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl is being played right now, and you're in the middle of it. You just don't know how long the game's going to be.
That's right. That's right. And if I like to joke that we're really at day zero, meaning we're not even at day one. We haven't even tried simple, obvious things. We were talking about getting the models and scaling the models and making them bigger. We're still trying to see how far we can push it before we try different things. And that's the reason I'm so unbelievably optimistic about the near and long-term future.
Now, why is generative AI just the beginning? Can you just unpack that a little bit and talk about the end game of AI? Like, not even, I won't say end game, but like the ultimate evolution of what that could look like from where we
Right.
are now.
Right. So originally the idea, if you go all the way back to the 1950s when AI really started being explored seriously, the thought was you could build one AI system and it would have all the knowledge of a human and all of its capabilities. And it took a few decades, but we realized it was actually pretty hard. I mean, in hindsight, it's kind of obvious, but at the time, we fell for like this mistake that because vision, like seeing something and recognizing it, or hearing somebody speak and understanding it, was effortless for us, that it wasn't that hard.
Right.
And the things that we thought were hard, like chess, which you have to see the board and think, if I make this move, and you have to think about the future and what the counter moves and the counter moves to the counter moves, that's really challenging for us. So we actually literally had the mistake that we thought chess was the epitome of intelligence, and things like vision and natural language were trivial problems. What's special about right now is those perceptive capabilities, vision, speech, language, etc., have essentially been solved. We have the technology to handle all of that. Generative AI is special in that it goes one level beyond that, and it is able to generate new output that is similar to its training data. So if you had a model that was trained on a bunch of images and their text descriptions, you can then create a brand new text description of an image that doesn't exist, and it can create that. And that's the stage we're in right now. It went from perceptual to generative. And then the next stage I think we're going to go through is, a lot of people call it agentic AI, and it's about agents. It's about AIs that have the capability to handle tasks. So you could say, you might just tell your computer, hey, schedule a vacation for me on my first, free weekend in the spring somewhere in Europe. And it can go handle all of that. It can handle the flights and the booking and restaurants and stuff like that, because it will be able to actually go out in the world and interact. But really close on the heels of that, and I think this is going to be in the next 3 years, we're going to enter what we call the physical AI phase. And that's because the same techniques that have made a lot of the generative AI possible, this technique called diffusion, is enabling massive advances in robotics. And so we're seeing humanoid robotics and other types of physical manifestations really have breakthroughs in a way that we haven't seen in maybe 30 years. And that means that the next within the next 10 years, it is a given that we are going to become very, very used to very capable, fluid, almost human-like robots moving around us in the world and doing things like the heavy lifting, literally doing the heavy lifting for us. That's right around the corner. Now, what's beyond that? I think you get into artificial general intelligence, artificial super intelligence, and honestly, after that, all bets are off. I really, truly do not know.
Wow, it's just the wide open future. I've seen that. I think we've all seen clips of the robots online, the ones that they're building. It seems like the one point of, and they'll eventually get there, is the smoothness of the human anatomy, in terms of how easily you're able to take your hand and just do something, just effortlessly. And that's just but that's just time, like you said. That's just learning, repetition, time, tech, learning, repetition, time, tech, and it'll eventually get there.
You are so right. And what's funny about that is part of the reason they're making, because I really don't work in robotics, but part of the reason they're making so much progress is all that time they're now simulating. They'll literally take like robotic arms, they'll show it how to do something in the morning, and then let it just go run in a simulated world and do it millions of times. And it can learn in these very, very high realism environments. And like you said, it's just repetition, because they're able to learn on their own now.
So incredibly interesting. All right, what about for you guys over at Kung Fu AI? Like we like to say at Dub, we like to eat our own dog food. we're all about video. We like to, it's what we do. But with you guys over there, what's been the past from 2024 and even into 2025? Are there any sales strategies that you guys have used that worked really well in 2024, and you're kind of either using those same strategies or you're going to adjust them for 2025 that a lot of salespeople and people can learn from in terms of what you're doing?
Yeah, yeah. So we're coming up on 8 years old, Kung Fu AI, and we've been doing AI engineering and strategy from day one. So it's been very nice to see sort of the world and the market move towards us. You know how it is. I've founded several companies. It's hard to get a company off the ground. Nobody knows who you are. You don't have necessarily a backlog of case studies that you can point to prove that you know what you're doing. We have found that just putting good content out into the world and sharing what we know, sharing what we love, not asking for anything back. And that means whether it's LinkedIn or other social platforms, video podcasts, YouTube, etc., just sharing our thoughts on where we're at and where we think we're going, and demonstrating excellence and credibility. That has been really effective, because as the world adopts AI and pretty much everybody begins to claim that they're an AI expert, it can really help separate and differentiate you to just demonstrate your expertise. So I think that's the thing that we're going to double down on in 25 and going forward.
Yeah, and that's amazing to hear, because I think sales leaders in general and reps, on the ground reps, try to think, okay, what's the way that AI can not replace me, but help me? And that's one of the biggest things. And at Dub, we have an AI
Yep.
assistant called Sia. It's an assistant for sales people, right? For sales folks. But for us, it's all about educating the AI. What does it know about the business? All that kind of stuff, right? And we have a procedure for that. But it's got to be very exciting for you guys to see that you've known for a very long time really start to work itself into the very positions that drive revenue, drive sales, drive growth, as an engine to help salespeople, not
That's
replace
right.
them. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more with that last point around helping people, not replacing people. We as a company try very hard to embrace those. We call it human augmentation, like augment humans, make them more powerful, make them more capable. And if you're going to automate something, automate the boring, repetitive stuff, and let humans focus on the interesting, more challenging, creative work. And that sort of mindset has really served us well.
So my favorite last question to ask everybody. So from your experience from the business world, okay, you have the educational world, everything you learn there, applications from the different companies you've gotten off the ground, from Kung Fu AI right now. What's been the biggest thing you've learned? Is there a singular thing, like, throughout your life when you've done the business aspect and you've built these things? Is there a takeaway that you learned? Like, I'm better with this now than I was then, or I learned this one thing that really helped me in terms of moving to the future. I think a lot of salespeople and business entrepreneurs, they love to hear those different things from people in terms of what they learned.
Oh, that's a great question. I think a few things come into my mind. Business is just so much harder. It's so much more difficult to get things off the ground and get traction and get momentum. I think that the biggest successes in my life have always come when I took on something that I wasn't sure I could do. They were like right at the edge of my abilities. And I think one of the secrets out there is that most people underestimate what they could do. And if you go to them and you point out something really challenging and amazing they've done, they'll say, well, yeah, but that was easy relative to this other thing, but this other thing's scary. And you're like, well, that was scary originally too. And I think, what I always mentor young people entering the workforce is, be provocatively, aggressively ambitious in challenging yourself to do things that you did not think you were smart enough or talented enough to do. And you will be really surprised at how far you go, because even if you fail, you get so much credit for tackling these really, really difficult challenges. Where if you try to do something just common and prosaic, even if you succeed, you don't necessarily get a lot of credit. So I just say aim high, and that has really worked out well for me professionally over the years.
No, that's amazing. Well, look, Ron, thank you so much for sitting with us today. I mean, so many people I'm sure are going to enjoy this podcast. What a great knowledge you just dropped here in terms of where AI started, what you thought, where it's growing, where it's going to go. I just think so much to learn. So I really want to appreciate you for coming in. What's the best way to people to reach out to you? Just the website, LinkedIn. What's the best way for people to kind of get a hold of you?
Yeah, kungfu.ai. Reach out on LinkedIn, podcast Hidden Layers. And then if you want to reach out via email, very simple. Ron at kungfu.ai.
I love it. Robert Dub. Gotta love the simplicity. 3
Exactly.
letters. That's all you need. You don't need any more than that.
Exactly.
Well, it was awesome. Listen, Ron, really enjoyed the chat, and thank you so much for joining. We really appreciate
Thank
it.
you so much for having me on. This was a blast.
Bye, everybody.